Welcome to the Hodja on Architecture podcast. The Origins of Architecture. Chapter 10. The first architects were communities. This season is called The Origins of Architecture. Over the past 9 chapters, we have explored architecture long before it became a profession, a discipline, or even a recognized concept. We have moved from temporary shelters to permanent settlements, from agriculture to construction, from houses to public spaces, from monumentality to proto-cities, and from environmental adaptation to vernacular knowledge. Throughout this journey, a recurring question has remained in the background. Who were the first architects? The question appears simple, yet it immediately confronts us with a problem. Modern culture often encourages us to search for origins through individuals. We ask who invented something, who designed it first, who deserves authorship, and who should be remembered as the creator. This tendency shapes much of architectural history as well. We frequently encounter architecture through the names of architects, associating buildings with individual vision, creative authority, and professional expertise. Yet the deeper we travel into the origins of architecture, the more difficult this assumption becomes to maintain. The first walls did not emerge from architectural offices. The first houses were not designed through professional drawings. The first public spaces were not planned through urban master plans. Architectural institutions did not commission the first monuments. Again and again, we encounter architecture without architects. This does not mean architecture emerged accidentally. On the contrary, the environments we have explored throughout this season reveal remarkable levels of intelligence, adaptation, and spatial organization. Settlements responded to environmental conditions. Agricultural communities developed storage systems. Vernacular builders learned to negotiate with the climate through materials and construction techniques. Proto-urban settlements organized circulation, density, and collective life. None of this occurred randomly. What we discover instead is a different form of authorship. Architectural knowledge was distributed rather than concentrated. It emerged through observation, repetition, experimentation, correction, and collective memory. Solutions evolved gradually as communities learned how to inhabit particular environments successfully. Architecture was not the product of isolated genius. It was the outcome of accumulated experience. This collective dimension fundamentally changes how we understand architectural origins. The earliest architectural environments were created not by individuals working separately from society, but by communities learning together. Construction knowledge is passed between generations. Materials were tested through use. Spatial arrangements evolved through repeated occupation. Architecture became a repository of shared learning embedded within the built environment itself. In this sense, the first architects were not individuals at all. They were communities. This idea may appear surprising because contemporary architecture often emphasizes personal authorship. Architects are identified through names, signatures, portfolios, and distinctive design languages. Yet for most of human history, architecture functioned differently. The knowledge required to build, adapt, maintain, and inhabit environments belonged to groups rather than individuals. Architecture emerged as a collective cultural achievement before it became a professional practice. This does not diminish the importance of architects. Rather, it places architectural expertise within a much longer historical continuum. The profession emerged from existing traditions of knowledge building. Long before formal education, professional accreditation, or architectural theory appeared, communities had been developing sophisticated understandings of climate, materials, construction, settlement, and social organization. The story of architectural origins therefore reveals something deeper than the origins of buildings alone. It reveals the origins of learning. Every transformation explored throughout this season depended upon the accumulation of knowledge across time. Agriculture required environmental observation. Construction required material understanding. Public space required social coordination. Monumentality required symbolic thinking. Vernacular architecture required environmental adaptation. None of these developments emerged fully formed. All were learned. This perspective also changes how we understand architectural innovation. Innovation is often imagined as a radical invention or a sudden breakthrough. Yet much of architectural history suggests a different process. New ideas frequently emerge through gradual refinement rather than complete rupture. Communities experiment, adapt, retain successful strategies, abandon ineffective ones, and pass knowledge forward. Architecture evolves through continuity as much as through change. The built environment therefore becomes more than physical construction. It becomes a record of collective intelligence. Walls contain lessons about climate. Settlements contain lessons about cooperation. Public spaces contain lessons about social organization. Vernacular buildings contain lessons about adaptation. Architecture preserves knowledge materially, allowing one generation to learn from another. This may be one of the most remarkable characteristics of architecture. Unlike many forms of knowledge, architecture remains visible within everyday life. Buildings teach continuously. They communicate successes, failures, values, priorities, and cultural assumptions. The environments we inherit become silent teachers, shaping how we understand the world around us. Seen through this lens, architecture is inseparable from civilization itself. Human societies do not simply produce architecture, they are also produced by it. The spaces people create influence behavior, memory, identity, cooperation, and collective experience. Architecture becomes both a product of culture and a participant in its formation. This relationship explains why the origins of architecture cannot be reduced to a single invention, location, structure, or individual. No first architect is waiting to be discovered at the beginning of history. Instead, there are countless communities gradually learning how to transform landscapes into places, shelters into homes, settlements into societies, and environments into meaningful worlds. Perhaps this is the most important lesson of the entire season. Architecture did not begin when someone called themselves an architect. Architecture began when humans learned to inhabit the world together. The origins of architecture therefore lie not only in building but in cooperation, not only in construction but in knowledge, not only in structures but in shared experience. Before architecture became a profession, it was already a collective act of civilization. Throughout this season, we have searched for the origins of architecture. We examined shelters, settlements, agriculture, walls, houses, public spaces, monuments, proto-cities, and vernacular knowledge. Yet perhaps the deeper story was never simply about architecture itself. Perhaps it was always about learning. Every transformation we explored emerged through observation, adaptation, experimentation, and collective experience. Architecture did not appear fully formed. It evolved through generations of people learning how to inhabit the world together. This may be the most important lesson of all. Architects did not create architecture. Architecture created architects. In the next season, Teaching the Designer, we will leave the first builders behind and turn our attention to a different question. If architecture is learned, then how do we teach it? How is design knowledge transmitted, challenged, refined, and renewed across generations? And how do we prepare future designers for a world that continues to change? Because architecture begins with building, but designers begin with education. This concludes Chapter 10 of The Origins of Architecture. The first architects were communities. Thanks for listening. See you in the next season.